on the stage right now. Ladies and gentlemen, please look at the cameras in front of you, okay? 3, 2, 1。好，那我们请贵宾呢看向前方大会摄影师的镜头，一起合照。3、2、1。好，我们再拍一张哦。One more。我们是请大家比一个赞好吗 ？Thumbs up, everybody. Yes. For another group photo. All right. 好，再次感谢，谢谢台上的摄影师，谢谢 ，Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 2022 Global Cooperation and Training Framework Gctf Conference on Ending Gender-Based Violence. 院长以及现场线上的所有贵宾，大家好，欢迎参加2022年 Gctf 终止性别暴力国际研讨会哦。We'd like to firstly thank all of our participants joining us on site and also online. My staff just told me we had more than 500 people in total right now. So give it up for yourself, would you? 那我们是先给自己一个掌声哦。目前现场加上线上与会的贵宾总人数呢，已经超过500人了，真的是非常的热烈哦。And also for the conference today, it is the one with the most co-hosting countries out of all Gctf events over the years. 那另外特别值得一提的是，我们今天的这个会议呢，也是 Gctf 历年以来有最多主办国家的一场哦。再次谢谢大家的这个合作以及参与。Of course, we welcome more partners and also countries to join in together. That's take this network of cooperation to the next level. 那当然呢，我们希望有更多的这个伙伴以及国家一同加入我们的行列，让这个合作的平台以及网络变得更加的强大。And talking about partners, next I'm going to introduce many distinguished guests here with us today. 那接下来呢，就为各位介绍莅临今天会议现场的贵宾，也请唱名到的贵宾呢起身，先跟我们挥挥手，致意一下。首先呢，要欢迎的当然就是行政院苏贞昌院长。Ladies and gentlemen, here with us we have Premier 苏贞昌 ROC Taiwan. Welcome. 行政院罗秉成政务委员罗秉成 a Minister with a portfolio executive Yuan ROC Taiwan. Welcome. 外交部吴钊燮部长 Joseph Wu Minister of Foreign Affairs ROC Taiwan. Welcome. Next, representing our Gctf partners and also our co-hosting countries. Firstly, we have Sandra Otkert, Director of American Institute in Taiwan, 美国在台协会台北办事处孙小雅处長。それでは日本台湾交流協会台北事務所横地明副代表でございます。明横地 Deputy Representative Japan Taiwan Exchange Association 日本台湾交流协会台北事务所横地晃副代表。Next we have Jenny Bloomfield, Representative Australian Office Taipei 澳洲办事处陆珍怡代表 Welcome. Next we have John Dennis, Representative British Office 英国在台办事处邓元汉代表欢迎。We also have Jordan Reeves, Executive Director of Canadian Trade Office in Taipei, 加拿大驻台北贸易办事处瑞乔丹代表 Welcome. Next, joining us, we have Philip Jogoszewski, Head of European Economic and Trade Office 澳洲经贸办事处高哲夫处长 Welcome. Omer Kaspi, Representative Israel Economic and Cultural Office in Taipei, 驻台北以色列经济文化办事处科斯比代表。Next, from other foreign offices in Taiwan. Firstly, we have Tommy Campbell Kunji, Representative of Papua New Guinea Trade Office in Taiwan. 接下来欢迎巴布亚纽几内亚驻台商务代表处康德明代表 Tanya Bertrand, Executive Director of Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office, Taipei, 卢森堡台北办事处贝坦雅处长 Davide Gidio, Representative Italian Economic Trade and Cultural Promotion Office. 接下来欢迎意大利经济贸易文化推广办事处纪大伟代表。Also with us today, we have Ambassador Robert Kennedy Lewis, Embassy of St. Lucia, 圣卢西亚大使馆路易斯大使，欢迎。And Guillaume Del Valle, Acting Director of French Office in Taipei, 法国在台协会戴宁志代理主任。We also have the First Secretary Zanene of the Embassy of the Kingdom of Eswatini in attendance. 那同时呢，我们要欢迎施瓦蒂尼王国大使馆的一等秘书，今天一起与会。Finally, our co-hosting partners from the civil societies. 接下来要欢迎的是美国国际民主协会台北办事处李鹏轩计划经理。We'd like to welcome Peng Shen Li, Program Officer of National Democratic Institute， 以及社团法人台湾彩虹平权大平台协会邓竹元副执行长朱远登 Deputy CEO Taiwan Equality Campaign。Thank you all so much for joining us today. And next, to give the opening remark on behalf of all GCTF partners, we'd like to welcome Ms. Bloomfield, Representative Australian Office, Taipei, to the stage. 接下来我们一起掌声欢迎澳洲办事处陆珍怡代表我们这次的 GCTF 伙伴们来致开场致辞。Let's welcome Ms. Bloomfield.
Thank you and good afternoon, Premier Su, Ministers, today's partners, the Department of Gender Equality of the Executive UN, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the American Institute in Taiwan, the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association, the Canadian Trade Office, the European Economic and Trade Office, the Israel Economic and Cultural Office, and the British Office, and implementing partners, the National Democratic Institute and the Taiwan Equality Campaign. Distinguished guests, I am honoured to represent all partners and co-hosts in opening today's conference on ending gender-based violence. Gender-based violence of any kind is never acceptable. This is a global issue that affects everyone, everywhere. Gender-based violence is rooted in gender inequality, harmful norms, and the abuse of power. It is a serious violation of human rights with consequences that are devastating. We know that in times of increased insecurity, displacement, and conflict, the incidence of gender-based violence increases dramatically. The COVID-19 pandemic has amplified and accelerated pre-existing inequalities, creating a climate for the regression of human rights. Reports of intimate partner violence in many countries, including Australia, increased substantially over this time. Cyber violence against women and girls also increased. Women are disproportionately targeted in every form of online abuse. Nearly 3/4 of reports of online harms received by Australia's National Independent Regulator for Online Safety, eSafety, came from women and girls. And the rate of abuse was much higher for younger women, women with disability, and those who identify as LGBTIQ. All people are entitled to respect and to be able to live their lives freely and to participate fully and equally in public life without fear of harassment, discrimination, or violence. Ending gender-based violence requires a national and a global effort from governments, workplaces, schools, communities, and individuals working together to change social norms, attitudes, and behaviours to eliminate gender inequality. Australia will continue to work towards greater equality and towards ending gender-based violence in all its forms, at home and in our region, including through our aid and humanitarian programs. Earlier this year, Australia's new Online Safety Act came into effect. This will be an important avenue for those who experience harmful online abuse to seek assistance when platforms fail to act. Taiwan is a leader in gender equality, including a world-leading proportion of female lawmakers. I congratulate Taiwan on the recent launch of its first ever Human Rights Action Plan, which I understand will look closely at these issues. Only by working together will we be able to end gender-based violence. I am delighted that we have distinguished speakers from Taiwan, Australia, the United States, Japan, the EU, the UK, Canada, Israel, India, and others joining this conference. Thank you all for your leadership, and I wish you a productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Miss Jenny Bloomfield, Representative Australian Office, Taipei. 我们再次感谢澳洲办事处陆珍怡代表。Just like Representative Bloomfield just said, gender-based violence really is a critical issue facing all of us in the world, and to end it, it really takes cooperation of all parties. Thank you once again. 我们再次谢谢代表哦。那接下来呢，我们要有请行政院苏贞昌院长到台上来致辞哦。那在院长致辞之前呢，我们荧幕上面等一下也会秀出有3位贵宾想要跟院长来打个招呼。我们先掌声有请院长到台上来。Next, we'd like to welcome Premier Su Zhenchang, RC Taiwan, to the stage, and also on the big screen right now we have Special Envoy Jessica Stern, Ambassador Stella Runner Grubachich, and also Ambassador Christine Clark. Online right now， 我们有美国国务院促进多元性别人权特使，以及欧盟对外事务部性别与多元大使，以及澳洲妇女及女孩大使。我们掌声欢迎他们。Let's welcome them. And Premier Su would like to say hi to all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you so much. 那接下来我们就再次掌声欢迎苏贞昌院长。And now for the remarks of Premier Su.
外交部吴钊燮部长、行政院发言人罗秉成政委、各国驻台的使节代表、各位女士先生，大家午安，大家好。
好。
7年前，台湾和美国有共识，要就整个全球合作的训练架构，大家一起来做更进一步的諮商合作。很快的，我们也邀请理念相同的国家一起来共襄盛举。日本、澳洲很快成为正式伙伴，而这之间，英国、加拿大各国也都陆续的许多在这一个架构上有很多一起大家来共同努力，开了非常多的相关会议。而我们看刚刚致辞的陆珍怡代表，在就任以来，透过这一个全球合作训练架构的会议，也进行了许多彼此之间相关的议题研讨，比如有关疫苗注射、有关洗钱防治，甚至于人权等等，更加强彼此之间的合作，更巩固彼此之间对这一方面的努力。而我们也都清楚的知道，我们去年和美国史登特使在台美民主咨商会议上也讨论要就终止性别暴力的召开国际研讨会。就是今天，我们很感谢有8个国家，大家一起来在今天在这里盛大召开举行。这是最多的主办国家，也看到各国的驻台使节最大的参与，线上更有许多一起共襄盛举。我们都希望借由理念相近、 价值相同国家之间的各种努力，能够在这一方面有更多的成果。大家知道，蔡总统上任以来，对于捍卫民主、追求自由、尊重人权，从法治上、从预算上、从政策上做了非常多的努力。政府尽心尽力所做出来这一方面的成绩，也受到国际上很多给我们的鼓励跟肯定，非常感谢。今天这一个会议，我们更邀请了美国的史登特使，以及欧盟的大使和澳洲的克拉克大使，大家来做专题报告。这个会议非常慎重的准备，非常盛大的召开，希望就我们大家一起关心，也应该做得更好、更努力来把它做好的终止性别暴力，大家一起来从方方面面做更多的努力，做更好的进步，让终止性别暴力成为大家一起努力最大的成果。祝福今天的会议圆满顺利，祝福大家，谢谢。
掌声，谢谢院长。有请院长呢在台上先留步哦，等一下是我们大合照的时间，有请院长呢先留步。Thank you very much to Premier Su for his remarks. Please remain on the stage. Next, we'd like to welcome all of our co-hosting partners to join Premier Su for a group photo on the stage. 那接下来呢，我们要再次有請政委、部長以及我們其他呢共同主辦的國家的代表一同到台上來 ，including Director Art Kirk, Yokoji Bukdaihyo, and also Representative Bloomfield, Representative Dennis, Executive Director Reeves, Mr. Jokozuski, Representative Cosby, 李鹏轩计划經理、鄧竹元副執行長以及行政院性平處吳秀珍處長，是到台上來一同加入合影的行列。OK。Yeah, we have everybody here on the stage, and now please look at the cameras in front of you. Yeah, just take one step forward. Yes. All right. Okay, everybody, look at the cameras in front of you. Firstly, to the cameras in front of you. 我们先看向前方的镜头，一起合照。And then to your right, 接下来看向右边。And then to your left, 接下来看向左边。再回到中间 and back to the cameras in the very back. OK. 好，接下来第二张是请院长以及台上的各位贵宾，我们一起比一个赞好吗 ？Yes, thumbs up everybody for the second photo. All right. To the cameras in front of you. 3, 2, 1. Okay, and please remain on the stage. We'd like to bring out 3 of our speakers once again to have a photo with all of you. We'd like to welcome back once again Special Envoy Stern, Ambassador Grubachich, and also Ambassador Clark. 那也要邀请我们等一下呢2位专题主讲师以及我们的第一个场次的主持人，现在在大荧幕上。Okay, everybody, let's have a photo together. All right, 3, 2, 1. Please look at the cameras in front of you. All right, let's do one more, one last photo. Okay, 最后一张，我们再比一个赞好吗 ？Yes, thumbs up, everybody. 3, 2, 1. For a better future. Yes. OK， 我们是再次给台上的贵宾热烈的掌声，也非常谢谢苏贞昌院长今天参与2022年 Gctf 终止性别暴力国际研讨会的开幕仪式。Thank you once again to Premier Su。我们是再次掌声，谢谢院长，谢谢。Thank you so much, Premier Su, for joining us for the opening of 2022 Gctf Conference on Ending Gender-Based Violence. Okay, and we have one more photo to take because just like I said, we have a lot of participants joining us online. So we'd like to take a screenshot of all of you joining us online right now. So everybody, please turn your camera on. Please let us see your faces on our screen. 那接下来呢，我们请这个线上参与我们今天会议的所有贵宾，现在可以把这个镜头打开 ，OK？ 我们试试跟他们挥挥手。Yeah, let's say hi to them. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, please look at the camera in front of you. Yes, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. 我们试试给他们一个最热烈的掌声。Let's hear it for all of them. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we're going to move on to the keynote speech session. 那接下来呢是我们专题演讲的场次哦。We have 2 speakers for the session, and let me introduce to you the first one is Jessica Stern, United States Special Envoy to advance the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons, Department of State. 那么第一位专题演讲师呢是美国国务院促进多元性别人权特使史登。In her role as Special Envoy, she works with governments, civil societies, and the private sector to promote equal respect for the human rights of the LGBTQI+ community. And I particularly love what she once said, that her job is to shorten the time that people have to wait for their human rights to be respected and protected. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Jessica Stern. 掌声欢迎。
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, well, first I have to say the energy is so palpable, even through this virtual format. I'm really excited to be here, and I wish I was in the room with you today. Warm greetings to everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you today. I want to especially thank Premier Su for his leadership in initiating this vibrant space for regional and international dialogue. I also extend my appreciation to his team for making this conference happen. Australian Representative Bloomfield, American Institute in Taiwan Director Oudkirk, and Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association Deputy Representative Akira Yokochi, thank you for convening this important global cooperation and training framework conference about ending gender-based violence. Also, a warm welcome to Ambassador Stella Romher-Gruberteach for joining me in delivering opening remarks on such a critical issue. I also want to recognize the Taiwan Equality Campaign's partnership and support from the U.S. National Democratic Institute for bringing civil society voices to the forefront of this event. For those of you who I don't know, I will introduce myself to try to make this virtual platform a little bit more accessible. I joined the U.S. Department of State in September 2021 as Special Envoy to advance the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons and lead policy related to the promotion of those human rights worldwide. I spent 25 years as a human rights defender before being named Special Envoy by President Biden last year. I am both the first person in the role who spent a career as a human rights defender and the first lesbian in the role. We know how rare it is to see queer women in positions of leadership. We also know how rare it is for human rights activists to be recognized as experts. So I emphasize these firsts because they represent a positive trend in the US government. They represent inclusive democracy, which is a priority for President Biden and many of us here today. Our leaders are more effective when they are more diverse and knowledgeable about policy design and implementation where no one is left behind. Today, I was asked to speak about the relationship between efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence and the struggle for the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons. I'm pleased to address this connection because understanding the relationship between the two is of paramount importance. The evolution of recognition of LGBTQI+ abuses at the United Nations is a useful historical illustration for this discussion. When we examine the concept of inclusion at the UN, we find that the movements against gender-based violence and for women's rights helped pave the way for recognition of the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons. For instance, consider the work of the UN Special Rapporteur on violence against women, its causes and consequences. That mechanism was one of the earliest UN mechanisms to address the protection gaps for LGBTQI+ persons. The mandate holder provided infrequent but significant references to LGBTQI+ persons at a time when much of the international system was silent. For instance, in 2005, the Special Rapporteur addressed a police attack on 3 Metis, a Nepali term that might be translated as transgender persons. In 2007, the Special Rapporteur addressed an attack in South Africa on 2 lesbian women by a 20-person mob, one of whom died after being beaten, stoned, and stabbed. The Special Rapporteur noted that this was not an isolated incident and that, quote, lesbian women face an increased risk of becoming victims of violence, especially rape. In a 2012 report, the Special Rapporteur wrote, quote, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, transgender, intersex, and queer persons, and also activists working in this sector, are targeted because they do not conform to stereotypes of gender, sexuality, and/or identity, thus becoming victims of homophobic crimes. Moving from there into a more recent context and a different mechanism, in May 2020, the Human Rights Council discussed a report by the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The independent expert called for, quote, a global ban on conversion therapy, end quote, because these practices are, quote, rooted in the belief that LGBT persons are somehow inferior, and that they must at any cost modify their orientation or identity to remedy that supposed inferiority, end quote. Along with the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, these mechanisms tackled stereotypes based on sex, harmful traditional practices, bodily autonomy, and the importance of gender equality. Clearly, the LGBTQI+ movement owes a debt of gratitude to the women's rights movement and the movement against gender-based violence, and these movements contribute to the advancement of human rights for all. The U.S. National Strategy on Gender Equity and Gender Equality and the forthcoming update of our global strategy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence take an intersectional, inclusive, and human rights-based approach to gender equality. They aim to tackle gender-based violence, strengthen women's rights, and strengthen GBV response mechanisms when LGBTQI+ persons are at heightened risk. We recognize that gender-based violence remains a persistent human rights abuse both at home in the United States and around the world, and that gender-based violence is intrinsically linked to all gender equity outcomes. In my mind, it's clear just how much these movements have in common and how much they need each other. But unfortunately, there are detractors. Let's consider their arguments, and we'll consider 4. First, some claim that trans women aren't women, but that's false. Trans women are women, trans men are men, and persons of any gender can experience gender-based violence. Anyone committed to ending gender-based violence must work to prevent and respond to GBV in all its forms and work to meet the needs of survivors of all genders. Some claim that any reference to gender in law or policy is code for LGBTQI+ rights, but that is false. Every person has a gender and is impacted by socially constructed gender norms and roles, not just women and not just LGBTQI+ persons. Third, Some claim that including LGBTQI+ persons in gender-responsive budgeting or policymaking detracts from women's rights, but that is false. Ensuring inclusive gender equity programs make gender equity programs more effective and will advance our shared goals of gender equality and safety and security for all. And fourth and finally on this point, some claim that cisgender heterosexual women have more power than LGBTQI+ persons, while others claim that LGBTQI+ persons have more power than women. Both are false. Oppression is unacceptable in any form. Violence against women and girls is persistent, severe, and harrowing. So is violence against LGBTQI+ persons, many of whom are women and girls. LGBTQI+ persons are often targeted on the basis of their actual or perceived deviation from gender norms, just as cisgendered women and girls are. Debating who is more oppressed is illogical, erases LGBTIQ women, and is a strategy to divide and conquer people who are already marginalized and vulnerable. Since I joined the Biden administration 7 months ago, I've probably spoken with hundreds of LGBTQI+ persons from around the world and countless officials from governments around the world. And the truth is, I sometimes feel whiplash from the contrast in conversations. In one conversation, I'll hear about sorrow, such as violent attacks on LGBTQI+ persons, like Sheila Lumumba in Kenya, who passed away in April after a heinous attack. Or about LGBTQI+ organizations who cannot legally register, like many of those I just spoke with in Malaysia. Or about the growing legal trend that seeks to ban information about the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons or censor LGBTQI+ characters on film or TV, as though by denying people relatable information, LGBTQI+ persons will simply disappear. The United States doesn't always get it right either. We still struggle with homophobia, transphobia, interphobia, and related intolerance. Even me, growing up as a lesbian in the suburbs of New York City, I was so isolated that I could hardly imagine how to survive. But thankfully, the world is changing. I spent Sunday morning meeting with activists supporting the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons, and every organization at that meeting was established within the past 3 years, which is an indication of a booming movement and growing courage. The issues these activists are tackling are broad and ambitious, working on economic empowerment, wills and trusts to protect LGBTQI+ families who don't have access to legal relationship recognition, impact litigation to tackle sodomy and cross-dressing laws, a queer youth shelter, and a new network of referrals for LGBTQI+ persons to trained and respectful therapists. This is the good news. Change is coming. So this brings me to Taiwan. At a dinner on Saturday, I told a gay friend in Malaysia that I would speak at this conference here today. And his eyes lit up, and he reached across the table to me, and he sort of grabbed my arm, and he said, "Taiwan is our beacon of hope." Not a beacon of hope, but our beacon of hope. And I felt as though he was speaking on behalf of many LGBTQI+ persons across Asia. This is a region that has yet to fulfill its potential for LGBTQI legal and substantive equality. But this is also a region bursting with activism, momentum, innovation, and opportunity. Taiwan raising the bar for the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons raises hopes and dreams across all of Asia. And so it gives me great pleasure to congratulate Taiwan on this week's 3-year anniversary of achieving marriage equality. Legal recognition for LGBTQI+ relationships is one absolutely crucial aspect of the fight for equality and against gender-based discrimination and violence. Taiwan's achievement of marriage equality, the very first in Asia, is an inspiration to LGBTQI+ persons and allies around the world. This is why I hope that Taiwan will amend its law to ensure that all LGBTQI+ couples in Taiwan, regardless of nationality, can enjoy equal protection for their relationships. On another point, Taiwan ranks near the top of indicators for gender equality, whether on women's participation in politics, notably including Taiwan's very own president, social tolerance for transgender individuals, or on the shrinking pay gap between women and men. I heard about the Legislative Yuan's recent efforts to address gaps in adoption laws to protect LGBTQI+ families and the Executive Yuan's pledge to draft a comprehensive anti-discrimination law inclusive of women, girls, and LGBTQI+ persons. These are exciting steps, and I am so glad that Taiwan continues to make strides for gender equality. With these commitments in mind, I hope that in the coming months, Taiwan will also consider ensuring equal access to assisted reproductive technology for LGBTQI+ families. And I also hope that Taiwan's authorities will act soon to ensure that procedures for changing gender markers are compliant with best practices globally and recent court decisions that have struck down requirements for surgery and other medical interventions. Finally, I hope that Taiwan will follow through on its very exciting pledge to offer an option for a third gender marker on legal identity documents. And I just want to applaud the Taiwanese health authorities' recognition that so-called conversion therapy is not a legitimate medical treatment. In conclusion, I want to say again that I wish I was in the room with you all today, but also that the conversation we're having at this conference is of the utmost importance. I'm so pleased to be speaking with governments and with civil society about how to protect and advance the human rights of LGBTQI+ persons everywhere, and I so look forward to learning from all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Special Envoy Stern. Thank you for such an inspiring and close to heart remarks and also sharing, and thank you for setting such a beautiful example yourself of how we can take this collected efforts further. Thank you once again to Special Envoy Stern. All right, and we're going to move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Stella Runner-Grubacic, who has become the very first EU Ambassador for Gender and Diversity, European External Action Service in 2021. And her role is to promote gender equality and diversity within the EEAS and also worldwide. She once said that achieving gender equality and diversity is not for a restricted circle of experts, but a task for everybody. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stella Runner-Grubacic. 掌声欢迎。
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
Yes, very good. Thank you once again for having me, and greetings from Brussels. It's a real honor to join you today, even though me too, like Ms. Stern, unfortunately, only virtually. So this should be considered, I hope, a first step to actually getting to Taiwan. So let me start by congratulating Taiwan and partner countries with the organization of the 2022 Global Cooperation and Training Framework Conference on Ending Gender-Based Violence. And a special thanks, of course, to Premier Su and to the co-hosts and co-organizers for having invited me. And greetings also all across the ocean to Jessica Stern, whom I hope to meet in person in a not too distant future. As was said previously in an introduction, only by working together we can end gender-based violence. So please allow me at the outset to assure you that the EU is 100% committed to the objective to safeguard and promote women's rights globally and to fight against all forms of violence against women and girls. And as you, host, already pointed out, in a way, my appointment is a proof of the seriousness of how we look at this issue. The EU wants to be a global leader in gender equality and women's empowerment, and it wants to be a role model worldwide. Gender equality is not only a political priority, but it is also at the core of EU values across its internal and external action. So let me give you a brief overview of what we are doing to integrate a gender and diversity perspective in our policy making, as well as to empower women and eliminate all forms of gender-based violence. The EU is determined to lead by example, and this means that in my position, I intend to ensure that all EU leaders and managers will walk the talk when it comes to gender equality and be held accountable as we introduce the requirement of gender-responsive leadership in our own institution. The introduction of gender-responsive leadership is part of the EU's action plan on gender equality and women's empowerment in external relations that was adopted in November 2020 and runs to 2025, abbreviated as GAP3. It is a tangible political signal for the EU to work together with all multilateral and regional partners, partner governments, as well as civil society and the private sector. And through GAP3, we aim to strive for a gender equal world, which enables women and girls to fully enjoy their human rights. By doing so, we obviously aim to contribute to building more inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous societies where no one is left behind. As we all know, the achievement of gender equality and the realization of women's and girls' rights are a prerequisite for development, for peace, and for security. And that is why gender equality is and will remain at the center of all our external action. This means that we need to ensure the mainstreaming of the gender perspective in all our policies. This is hard work, but we see that we are achieving certain results, as was evidenced recently when the EU member states adopted the strategic compass for EU security and defense. At the multilateral level, the EU is committed to the international rules-based order and multilateral system, with, of course, the United Nations at its core. It is our deep conviction that we need to continue to contribute to shape a rules-based multilateral system that is capable of effectively tackling the multiple and complex challenges of our times. The objective is to place gender equality as well as the full enjoyment of human rights by all women and girls and their empowerment at the center of UN action and decisions. And of course, this is one area where we are looking forward to further working together with Taiwan. The EU and its member states will continue to champion and mainstream the women, peace and security agenda, and in particular will continue to take a leading role in the work of the Commission on the Status of Women by promoting ambitious outcomes, combating the pushback on women's and girls' rights, and ensuring high-level participation in each session. Ladies and gentlemen, gender-based violence remains one of the most significant challenges of all our societies and is deeply rooted in gender inequality. In all its forms, gender-based violence remains underreported and overlooked, and this is both inside and outside the European Union. If I may give a few examples of the current status of affairs in the EU, according to the EU Agency on Gender Equality, 1 in 3 EU women from the age of 15 has experienced physical and/or sexual violence. 1 in 20 women has been raped. 1 in 2 has experienced sexual harassment, and 1 in 5 has experienced stalking. It is a political priority for the EU to do all it can to prevent and combat gender-based violence, support and protect victims of such crimes, and hold perpetrators accountable for their abusive behavior. On the 8th of March of this year, the European Commission adopted a proposal for a directive on combating violence against women and domestic violence. And this proposal aims to effectively combat violence against women and domestic violence throughout the EU. It does so by proposing measures in the following areas: the criminalization of and sanctions for relevant offenses, protection of victims and access to justice, victim support, prevention, coordination, and cooperation. So the directive sets the basis for strengthening the actions taken by the EU's member states. It is currently under the legislative process, and once adopted, it supports the ongoing EU process for the ratification of the Istanbul Convention that was signed by the EU in 2017. The EU also continues to remain at the forefront of supporting actions to fight all forms of violence against women and girls through the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative. Through this initiative, we are investing to end gender-based violence with active programs in more than 26 countries. For the EU, with its 500 million euros of support to this program, Spotlight represents the largest investment in a single cause that we have ever made in the UN system. Let me now turn to the need to advance the rights and opportunities of women and girls. First, and very obviously, support to education, and particularly girls' education, has a central role to play. Gender prejudice and resulting gender discrimination begin in childhood. From the moment they are born, girls and boys face unequal gender norms regarding their expectations and access to resources and opportunities, with lifelong consequences in their homes, in schools, and in their communities. All women and men, girls and boys, should be free to express their ideas and emotions and pursue their chosen educational and professional paths without the constraints of stereotypical gender norms. These stereotypical gender norms are often combined with stereotypes that are based on race or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age or sexual orientation, thereby reinforcing the negative impacts. I think it is fair to say that discriminatory and gender unequal cultures and norms present the key obstacle to gender equality and women's empowerment. And therefore, policy, programs, and projects must also target changing attitudes among men and boys in order to achieve gender equality and to empower women and girls. If we do not change men's attitudes towards women, then gender equality programs, which focus exclusively on women, will not be successful, and in many cases can bring about resistance as well as increased dangers to women. Of course, equality will not happen simply by putting the right laws in place, important as that may be. But equally important is the recognition that gender inequality harms all genders. Still, it requires a mindset shift, and some would argue even a generational shift. In order to achieve long-lasting change, we need to shift people's minds and behaviors and get rid of gender stereotypes once and for all. Last week, we celebrated the Idaho Day on the 17th of May as a means to mark the progress made when it comes to the LGBTIQ+ people to be accepted for who they are, regardless of whom they love or how they identify. Sadly, some of the basic rights of the LGBTIQ+ community continue to be under attack, not only in faraway regions, as we've just heard, but also on our own doorstep and in our midst. Talking about the human rights of LGBTIQ+ persons is not talking about a small minority of people. It is talking about the values the EU is founded upon. Increasingly, talking about the human rights of LGBTIQ+ persons, though, is also talking about security issues. This is evidenced when we see how the anti-gender narrative and hate speech against the LGBTIQ community are used as an instrument of war, for instance, by Russia in its war against Ukraine. At the EU, we believe that it is important to focus on the issue of disinformation, on how this is also being used to undermine our societies, our democracies, and what the EU has built up over the past 70 years. And this underlines even more the need for cooperation between the EU and our partners worldwide. Through our EU delegations and civil society organizations, we must continue to develop a common response to disinformation and LGBTIQ+ narratives worldwide. This is again where I commend you with this conference. A gender equal and peaceful world is a world where the generations to come will not face the gender-related barriers that prevent them from reaching their goals and fulfilling their dreams. I thank you for having the conference. I wish you best of luck with the discussions and not least with taking the next steps, and I'm looking forward to be there with you to do so. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you once again to Ambassador Stella Runner-Grubatich for your valuable input in this session. Thank you so much. And of course, Taiwan will try to do its best to fulfill its commitment and also responsibility to end gender-based violence and to facilitate gender equality and also gender diversity. Thank you once again to two of our keynote speakers. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, next we're going to move on to session 1, ending gender-based violence.